Right. Oh, let that run. And I think now I need to. Hello, everyone. Hi. Just got to do some bits before we get going. I can actually breathe a lot more easily this morning. I might cough a bit. I'm seeing the 11:11 on the laptop again. I think it's about 11. Yeah, 11:04 is actually the correct time. I hope everyone's well. I hope everyone's landed after yesterday, which was great. Pleasure. Pleasure as always. Always a pleasure. And I had some brief doubts about doing the two things together. I can't even remember the stories that I had in my mind about it, to be honest. But like the more I actually really sit with it, and especially after having brought through Grace yesterday, it's like the two are just so intrinsically, inextricably linked. So yeah, and I've said, like, if you're here today, I think a couple of you might have not been here yesterday. It doesn't matter which way around you do them. And I'm leaving the recordings up for a while, perhaps even permanently now, I'm thinking, so you can come back to them. Because these are important. These are important. And I want to start with a story that I heard. It was a couple of weeks after I decided that I was going to do these teachings and, like, advertise them, so to speak. And I was listening to a podcast with Aubrey Marcus. You might know him. And he was interviewing Guru Ravi Shankar. And I had to turn the podcast off about half an hour, 40 minutes in, because fucking Aubrey was just getting on my tits. He was like speaking in this very affected, calm voice because he was speaking to Guru. I was like, come on. And it just got on my nerves too much. So I turned it off, but I got far enough along in it for just a real little gem to come in. And it was a story that Ravi Shankar had told. What was the question, though? The question was a good question. What was the question that he asked? It was something about relating to God. Like, what stories do you have that relate to this thing, this unknown? Thing. It was what is God like? Just get rid of this. Sorry, I've just got some things that just. What is God like? And the father took the boy outside and asked him a series of questions. The first question he asked him was, what was here before this house was built? And the boy said, space. And then he asked, where does this house stand now? And the boy said, space. And then he asked, when the house is removed and destroyed, what will be there now? And the boy said, space again. And the man said, exactly. God in which everything is. So actually, it's a little bit deeper than I intended to go straight off the bat, because I also want to talk about space in a more practical application of it. However, an appreciation for space as this ineffable thing is also really important when it comes to the more practical stuff, such as waiting before you respond and trusting yourself in those nothing spaces where all you want to do is take action and do things and move, but everything is like just saying no, stop and be. And when your mind is racing and worrying and trying to find an answer, yet you know that the problem can't actually be solved on the same plane that it was created, so all you have to do is stop, and yet everything in you just wants to keep searching, finding it. And actually having reverence for this unfathomable God space is essential. And reverence is actually a really important word, because I'm not talking about like getting it. I'm not talking about understanding what that space is or learning how to use it for personal gain. And like, I'm not even really talking about knowing it, because in a manner of speaking, you won't ever really know it. But reverence for it, and respect for it, and trust in it is what allows us to show up in the world like really powerfully and authentically, and in such a way where we're able to freely exercise choice, and not only that, but wise choice. And of course, I'm bringing this to you from like a location of having really grappled with it. Like something about the addiction and the neurologically addicted mind is that like it just wants to react now. It just wants to reply to that shitty comment on social media right now. Or that inflammatory text, or it just wants to figure it out and figure everything out right now. And it wants to defend itself right now. And in that urgency is often this sense that unless we do the thing right now, we're not safe. We'll miss the boat or something. And in our lack of reverence for observing space, we actually lose intimacy. In the relational sense, it's the constant waiting for your turn to speak and not actually really hearing the other person. Like, what world are we living in when that's happening? Where are we? And when we transfer this out into like the wider sense, we're closed off from what I would call like deep listening and deep seeing as well. We are deaf and blind to the wisdom of space. And of course, that you know, there is incredible wisdom there. It is all of it. Unlimited wisdom. Everything we need to know at the exact moment that we need to know it. Everything we need to see, everything we need to hear at the exact moment that we need to see and hear it. So of course here, like the essential ingredient is always trust. Without that, it doesn't come. And you know, like, when I initially made these notes, and it happened. It's so funny because I made the note and I'm coming to the note now, and it happened again. As soon as I said those last sentences to you, it was like the space just poured in, like I felt it. Maybe you felt it too. Really felt myself like sink into that space, that silence. And when I initially made these notes, it was like it was in a deeper way than I had for some days. My mind has actually been somewhat restless this week on the lead up to these teachings, because when I deliver these things and they come through, it's like I'm being invited into a deeper level of it. So anything that is actually running in conflict to that is like, oh, we're gonna die. Now, something incredibly useful, and basically it's like over this last week, right, some things have come back around. I think it's always helpful to say this as well as many times as possible. Like, you'll see things coming back around and it's so easy to judge that and be like, why is it coming up again? I thought I'd resolved this. And like that thought that you have, I thought I'd resolved it, is the trap, right? Because things come back around to see how you navigate them. There's something incredibly useful that a mentor of mine, named Angel, offered in teaching once, was how it is part of a child's development process to test the boundaries, to see if we, hypothetically, the adult taking care of this child, can hold them. And in doing that, it's like when the child tests the boundaries, it's like they're asking, you know, and perhaps sometimes through very testing and difficult behavior, can you hold me here? Am I safe with you here? And the reason she was talking about it, I think the context was, it was around debunking this judgment that kids are inherently manipulative or something, which is of course not true. And though I have yet to have and take care of kids of my own, it was invaluable to me, because I have been able to be with this knowing when working with my internal gaggle of inner children. And I think it is very, very powerfully transferable inwards in that respect. And there are two things that came up for me, right, when I considered that. As it pertains to space, the repeated message that I have been getting from what I think is probably one of, if not my youngest child fragment, like baby, tiny little baby, is, I need you here. That is to say, like, really, fully, deeply, wholly present here. Fully inhabiting the space here. Like this newborn baby inside me who has, in their own wordless way, been longing for my full, undivided presence. And it has, and it continues to be the work of a lifetime to actually, you know, really give her that. And I will tell you that I know that this tiny baby holds like the master keys to that deeper awakening and presence. And I want you to consider this now, like, you know, what have your own messages been from these really, really tiny parts? Because that, or I believe anyway, that really deep awakeness and here-ness is fully realized creative potential. And it's, you know, like as I'm saying these words, I'm like, woo! you know, because it's a lot, because really when you sink all of the way into that space, you realize that that is all you are, as per that story at the beginning. And the second thing that came through when I considered it initially was that even in like moments, hours, days where sinking into that space feels really, really far away and there's like this internal restlessness, the space still exists, just like grace. Just like grace is always there, right? You know, as I was saying yesterday, so is space. Even when you're spinning like really fucking furiously, it's still there, in between breaths, in between thoughts, even though thoughts might be coming in really, really quick succession, there is still space between them. So, you know, like this also brings me back to that piece when I'm talking about like yesterday, and again, those of you that didn't catch up yesterday, don't worry, but yesterday I talk about this piece about celebrating coming back. You always celebrate coming back. That is where we must keep resolving to shift our attention. And of course, what do we always come back to, right? We just come back to space. And actually, you know, physicists have been saying it for a while, there is more space than there is anything else. And I think a lot of our anguish and issues come from this scramble to try and fill it up. We're afraid of the space, yet it is our most solid and unwavering ally. And when we can become unwavering in the space, we have access to everything. But it is a very surrendered position. Like you can't have an agenda with it. You won't be able to gain access to everything so that you can just execute your personal will and get the things that soothe your inner children. Like when you arrive there, all of the way you discover. And when I talk about, I just want to actually come back to that a minute. The piece on soothing inner children, it's like the ultimate soothing, the true holding of them is actually just being in the space. However, if we've spent, and many of us will have spent certain like portions of our lives just not inhabiting that and kind of letting them fend for themselves and be like, oh, so then they have all of these wants and desires that they think they need from the outside so they can feel better, when actually all they need is you. Just wanted to add that extra thing. But when you arrive all the way here, you discover, and again, I said it yesterday in no uncertain terms, that like the strategy is that there is no strategy. And that is where like true wisdom can actually come to the surface, is from that location of no strategy, from the space. So as far as like practical application goes, it's like when you're looking to respond to something, like a text or a comment on social media or an email or whatever it is, and it's like a difficult connection, there's information, or it's confrontational, or it's awkward, or it's just poked something in you that is making you squirm a bit. And what I am finding, annoyingly, is that you really have to let all of the charge settle first. and actually also then to make, before you respond, right, you let all of the charge settle and you make peace with that taking as long as it takes, whether it be an hour, whether it be 3 days, whether it be a week, whatever it is. And this is something that I have practiced and repeatedly fucked up, and I've ran it until I was able to get really, really clear. And even then, like, I still grapple with it. But ultimately, wise response arises out of the space. And we want to rush to respond because we want to protect ourselves, and also because the charged energy is perhaps something that we are accustomed to using as a way to get our point across. Like, we feel like it gives us some momentum, and often a false sense of power. And the thing is, like, for as long as we're intent on riding that energy as a way to communicate, we're actually only ever being governed by the need to control and dominate. And the thing is, it gets really, really subtle. Like, I have found in this practice, I can really, really convince myself that, no, you know, I'm coming from you know, a kind place, and I'm not saying that can't exist with it. However, for as long as there's that urgency, I just need to say the thing. There's always going to be some level of control and protection underneath that. Like, being in like a relational practice that is really, you know, truly true, it actually just requires you to put all of the urgency and therefore all of the weapons down. The shield, the whole lot has to just come down. Because for as long as there's that urgency, like, wisdom does not live there. She just can't live there. And look, as well, I want to say, like, this isn't even about being the bigger person. It's about you taking care of you. And that then actually becomes an extension for the care that you give to the world, to everyone else. And of course, like, the first step here is to really have total acceptance for all the times where you've just knee-jerked and spilt and gotten defensive and lashed out. And we'll do it for as long as we do it. And it's fine. It's okay. And grace is the thing that allows that space to open up. It's where, you know, the more it opens up, you have increasingly longer and slower moments. It seems it's like everything goes in slower motion, in which to just be with the discomfort and the charge, and to eventually then make a different choice. And look, like, it's hard. I have convinced myself so many times that I am ready to respond to something, and that the charge has gone when actually, like, it just hasn't. And I've been telling myself really, really convincing story. And one of the reasons, like, I think we become so impatient in those spaces is because we just want to get rid of the thing. We want to get the thing out of us that's been, like, touched. We don't want to hold it. Another hot potato. I talked a lot about potatoes yesterday. Yeah, the charge actually exists to direct us towards something that is unaddressed, unfelt, and, you know, unresolved within us. So we need to just, like, hang around and let the potato digest. And we have to allow it to pass all the way through. And the allowing of it to pass all of the way through involves us actually ceasing to try and figure it out. So if you're not, I think, you know, if you're not trying to just respond now, and there is a pause, it's like, okay, now I need to just, like, figure this out so that I can get this out. And it actually involves us not figuring it out. yeah, like we just don't want to be with the tension. We don't want to be with the tension. And that is the practice. And it involves us just coming back here to the space between breaths, space between thoughts. Everything we need to say, everything we need to know, everything that is like authentic to us, that needs to be expressed, that is true to be expressed, free of control and woundedness and judgment, will arrive out of that space. And honestly, like the more you just practice giving it space, just being here, like it will just drop in out of the sky. Like you just be like, oh, right, I know what I need to say. And it will be loving, and it will be honest, and it will be in connection. And you are capable of that. I think I had a whole thing about just feeling like I wasn't capable of it. You are capable of that when you give yourself space. The longer I pause, the kinder I become. But being in that pause requires me to really let go of the need to defend myself from anything or anyone. And in order to let go of that need to defend myself, I have to really, really, really see myself. Like I have to be really, really, really rooted into that. So that's my practice. It will drop in out of the sky. And you'll be able to respond, and this is really important, you'll be able to respond without an attachment to like the outcome of it. It will just be the truth for the sake of the truth. It won't be about trying to bring someone around to your point of view. There'll be no like hope that they will take it well or whatever. You'll just be offering it while inside yourself. So if something has you all hot and enraged and hurt and defensive and urgent, then the cue is, of course, to stop and take care of yourself first. And there are varying degrees of those sensations, you know, like sometimes it is just like really like, whoa, and sometimes it's actually like quite a bit more subtle. And the need for you to stop and take care of yourself is just as important. And I may be hearing some of you ask, but what about when I don't have the space? Like in real time, relating, face to face. What if I actually don't believe I have the option to stop? And firstly, I want to say, like in response to that, that all of it is still welcome. Like when I talk about this practice of being in the space and wise response over inflamed reaction, the inflamed reaction is still going to just be a thing. Like it's still welcome. Like your mess and your reactions are still allowed. They are not wrong. And that's why I just want to come back to the grace piece first, because we can't be totally responsible for what is ours unless we can extend grace first. That repeated extension of grace means that, like, if on occasion you do like just lash out or react or respond, you'll be able to repair that with ease and quickly, and sometimes even in the moment. You know, I found with my own practice what actually, before I was in places where I might have exploded, and I was very explosive once upon a time. I still occasionally explode. But in places where I might have otherwise exploded, before I got to the point where I just didn't explode and I was able to pause, would be the explosion and then the immediate, like, that was out of line, I'm sorry, like the immediate cleanup. So it's all welcome. And the reason I was able to then be in that immediate cleanup was because I was instead giving myself grace. And that part of the grace piece is just being fucking honest with yourself. What often happens with the shame and the self-beating is that we kind of back ourselves back into a hole. We don't acknowledge it and we go in. And then that actually perpetuates the behavior. So you see here about grace and responsibility. I just want to come back to that piece on grace and responsibility. We become truly responsible for ourselves when we extend grace. We tend to play out the same shit otherwise. But also, and coming back, I went off on a bit of a tangent then. Coming back, so I've just spoken about it all being welcome, the grace piece. This is important, right? But on a more subtle level, I found that you can drop into the space in real time, face-to-face relating. And really, all it is a dropping of the defense. And the timeline is almost like it can collapse. And I'll give some examples in a minute. It's a preparedness to actually just be caught off guard, you know, like I come back to this piece on dropping the defenses, and it's even more like spicy and like, oh my God, with people face to face, like being prepared, just being prepared to be caught off guard. The willingness to just be completely unguarded, even in the face of really like hurtful projections. It's an acceptance of the possibility of being in an interaction with someone where it just feels a bit dead-ended, like you don't really know where to go, and you actually just have to stop working out where to go. Zoom start update when I wanted to join, so I had to switch on my phone. It's what freaked me out. Yeah. It's good to notice these things. So there was a moment like this a long while ago with my sister. It was really profound, actually. It really just came through as I was bringing this through. And my sister and I's relationship hasn't always been easy. It's really deepened over the years. And up until a certain point, it was really difficult. She was very, very easily activated into angry defense, and so was I. I didn't have the capacity to be in it with her. I had a lot of defensiveness of my own. I had a lot of judgment. And we just found like points of disagreement very hard as a result, because we both just had defenses up. And we had a moment on the phone where she had sort of gone to criticize me for the way I was dealing with something. And I really, really felt myself wanting to just close off and shut her down and shut the conversation down. And instead, I did a thing that I had never done, which was I just let her words hang there and just stayed present in the silence with her. And the initial like pain that I'd had in reaction kind of like it was, I don't know how many moments passed. It was only a few moments, but it just dispersed into the space. And then out of that space, and I've forgotten what she said, but out of that space came like compassion. Like something moved in my sister in that silence. And she said a thing that was really quite profound. I wish I could remember what she said, but I remember how it felt. And I couldn't have received that from her had I not stayed open and receptive in that moment. Had I not given up my need to defend myself against whatever projection she had. And you know, the more I consider this, like it was so beautiful, because it was like there was this moment where it's like there's the criticism, and then you kind of want to, in defense, you want to demonize them and be like, they're a bad person who's against me. And I could have gone into that and acted that out with her by just going, blah, 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 whatever. But then I opened instead. And then the truth of her came through, and I saw that, and we fucking saw each other. This is really important. This is very sight as well. If you've been keeping up to date with what I'm offering, and I'm going to come back to that at the end, but this is very much about sight. So much of this is about clear sight and seeing things as they are. But like, we were just really able to see each other in that silence. And likewise, I've told this story a few times, but there was a moment earlier in the year, and it's always worth retelling this differently because something different comes through every time. But it was like earlier in the year, Lewis and I really hit a wall during a heated discussion about something that had just kept coming up and coming up and coming up. And there was a point where I just did not know where to go. And I was almost about to close off. And then this space opened up. I just inhabited it for a moment without needing to know what was next. And the words and like the wisdom just came, and the fog that we were both in and struggling to see each other through just cleared. And the point here, the thing that's really came through as I recalled it this time that hasn't come through before, was that the understanding came as I spoke. It was like the understanding didn't come first. It was like the gnosis and the expression merged and came through simultaneously. And then we both understood. And from that spot, you know, there was intimacy. After a period of, in this discussion, of there being like a kind of coldness. We were kind of trying to see each other through this fog, and I had my projections and he had his, and right. And look, I also want to say here that these are examples of stuff like going well, let's put it that way, for the you know, as far as like having a preference for things going good or bad goes, like I can say that on both of those occasions they were very profound and they came through well. And the point I want to be with here as well is that sometimes you will hang in the silence with someone's projection and even cruelty, and they just won't be able to meet you. Yet the willingness to hold yourself in the space is the ultimate salve, not the outcome. So I just need to bring us back to that, because the point here is that it's never about the outcome. But I can tell stories like that, and our mind can go, oh, okay, right, so we'll do that, so then we get this outcome. And sometimes people won't be able to meet you. Yeah, that is magic as well, because then you have really, really accurate information about a relationship and where you stand in it and what boundaries you need to have. And I can also like virtually guarantee you that the outcome will almost always surprise you in a very, very pleasant way, you know, but ultimately it's not about that. It's about the agreement that you have with yourself to unconditionally hold yourself, even when no one else can. Because that's the only real safety we can cultivate, is sinking into that location within, the ocean within, that trusts the space and above all knows itself as the space. Not as the noise that fills the space. Which brings me on to my next piece, which is this remembrance, which I've already, you know, alluded to, that you are not what fills the space. What you are is the space in between. And that's why that really deep knowing comes from there. It doesn't come from your mind, which is a part of what fills the space. And also, important point is that you know, the mind will play a part in giving words and giving language to what comes out of that deep space. But the practice is being able to discern when the mind is translating that wisdom that arises out of the space, or when it is just garbling to fill the space up. I remember what I just said about the moment with my husband where the knowing and the expression merged and came through simultaneously. There's a certain, there's a quality to that coming through that is very, very different to garbling to fill up the space. The more you practice with it, the more clear that difference will be. Now, in terms of how this like relates to creation and creativity, because I really, I want to bring these pieces back to that as much as possible. I don't really talk about masculine and feminine energetic stuff that often. It's not really like it is my realm of thought, and also, thank you, it's a great mug. It is that realm of thought, and also, you know, I just don't tend to use that language very often, but I have recently done some quite extensive writing on it, because there was a really kind of central truth to it, and what I think is a foundation really of the authentic teachings around it that really kind of landed in my body. And when it did, I realized how like monumental that piece was in terms of it really kind of waking up en masse. And that is that the feminine principle goes first. And there are different ways you can say it. The feminine principle leads. There are different ways of putting it, but I've done some writing specifically about how it plays out interpersonally, with women as the primary torch holders of the feminine energetic principle. But I want to just focus here on the internal relationship, because we all contain both. And on the initial piece where I was talking about how it plays out in interpersonal relationships, I had this really brilliant reflection back from a man who had read my writing. And this is what he said. He said, "But I'm not sure I have read anything that revealed a truth that's then proceeded to cascade through all of my lenses of perception. As men, we are taught to lead, yet we have been disempowering women and ourselves by believing that we have any idea whatsoever how to give birth." And actually reading his reflection, let it drop down even further. Like, while that particular discussion did have like more gender infused into it, because we were talking about interpersonal relationships between men and women and how we co-create in those relationships when we are truly holding our port, so to speak. But when I bring this into the internal relationship where we contain multitudes of both, right? Coming back to this piece on knowing how to give birth. Like, as it pertains to like the feminine quality that exists inside all people, regardless of your gender or whether you have a womb, the wider truth is that the genderless feminine principle creates out of nothing. That is it. That is the feminine. Life is drawn from this void. It is the void. And from this great open space through which all things come into being. So the feminine leads, whatever word you want to give it, goes first, is the visionary, because the feminine is that space. She is that pulsing, pregnant energy that appears as nothing, yet becomes everything. But of course, it cannot become something until the masculine principle is called forth to be the architect of it. So there is no creation without the presence of both principles. But you see, you may be able to see very clearly that culture at large doesn't have a great relationship with the space. we often think nothing's happening. Like my big initiation that happened, well, I say my big was that fucking line. But like one of the big initiations that happened all the way through last year was this like, nothing's happening. I need to do something. Oh my God. You know, I had a real big thing with this, unwinding this. And underneath that, when I went underneath that, it's the thought of like, I'm going to be left hanging. And we think if I don't do something, I'll be left without. And we get bored and scramble for stimulation inside of it at best. And we become straight up fucking terrified at worst. And remember, like, and this is really important as well. Like, remember that there's a commonly known piece around boredom being a portal to creativity. Because of course, allowing boredom, the allowing is important as an opening into creation is an expression of this very truth. And much like the pause we take before responding, where we have to accept that it will just take as long as it takes for the charge to settle, we have to accept that we'll be just in the being for as long as we need to be before an authentic and true call to action and to architecting comes in. I get really bummed up again. I was clear this morning. I realised I become very nasally again. Ugh. So I initially, when I sat with this, right, I thought, do I need to speak to the extremes? Because the truth is, a lot of us are more like, do, action. But then also some of us are more predisposed to the other extreme of like having that thing running, but just collapsing in front of you and not doing anything. But it really actually doesn't matter if your disposition is to freeze and take no action or just overdo and bang it all out. It's still all about the relationship to the space, to being with yourself in it in a way that, you know, is ultimately kind and accepting and eventually very, very deeply trusting. I think that it doesn't matter what the nature is of your saboteur or what your particular bind or set of binds is. There is a power that we all possess. And part of that power is deciding that you actually just know, right? You just know. You actually just get to decide that you know. I thought you said the guy giving birth. But you know, this is really important. The decision to know that you know. That you'll know when to go. You'll know what to do. You actually do just know. Like second guessing, worrying about getting it wrong, and you know, those particular flavors of perfectionism are actually all are allowed to continue running riot when we're not plugging into and extending grace. So that's always your cue to come back to that. And you know, the reason I come back to this piece around grace being this hot potato that we keep dropping, because we can also be in the second guessing and the worrying about getting it wrong and the confusion, because when we actually really do fully establish ourselves through grace, we're going to see all of the things that are going to perhaps be inconvenient to see. It's another reason why it's a hot potato. Another reason why space is a hot potato. Because you're going to see things as they are, which is actually the most fucking stunning thing. So beautiful. But will be inconvenient for certain parts of us too. And sometimes that can take precedent. And the practice is training it not to. So this is why like the grace and space teachings really come together, because one strengthens the relationship with the other in both directions. Grace is what allows us to make peace with the noise that is not what we are. And it also initiates us into deeper recognition of what we truly are, which is the space. And then in that, we discover that grace is in fact space, and space is in fact grace. And that is all we are. I'm going to check the time. Perfect. I've got a few minutes. I'm so glad these come in under the hour. It's absolutely perfect. So that's the crux of it. You know, I briefly mentioned just now, like there's a lot of sight coming through here. Sight weaves through it. And it occurred to me yesterday, right, that sight is like the secret third thing. And I've pointed a lot to this thing about seeing people as they are, seeing life in general as it is, and above all, seeing ourselves as we are, for what we truly are. And that's like, that clear sight is the beingness that space and grace kind of leads us into. And I'm going to do a full transmission on sight soon. I'll be sharing information on that in the next few days. I'll probably do it like this. And you might have seen some poetry and some pieces that I've been writing on it. But for now, I think all I want you to know, because this is the wider body of work I'm doing, right? Sight, that I'm inviting people onto. The primary invitation is around actually really being able to see what we are as we are. And then, like, subsequently, the freedom and the grace and the space that opens up when we can see it in everyone and everything. It's like that state of like the fog really clearing. And, you know, and in with that, then it is really an invitation into an in-depth conversation about what actually prevents us from really seeing our value and our brilliance. Like, we'll be doing some really deep work on the unseen wound and the gift of sight itself, because those two things tend to go hand in hand. You know, people who tend to rerun this experience of feeling invisible and feeling unseen also often have this gift of being able to see really deeply into other people, which is why I've mentioned a few times in my pieces, like I'm looking at human design projectors, and also like teachers and artists and facilitators, but not specifically, not exclusively. You know, this is for everyone who feels called. Just if you are one or both of those things, like if you were waiting for a thing, this is it. But like, there's always like this, when I do containers, right, and it was the same with Venom, there's always this invitation into seeing how that then, like, imagine a world, look at it at a wider level. What would it mean for everyone to really deeply see themselves and see that thing in others? And when I say everyone, like, that's huge, because even just having one person in a room full of people can be fucking transformative. I was listening to a podcast with my teacher's teacher actually a couple of days ago, and she was talking specifically about like feminine power and how, especially as women, like, we really have the ability to just walk into a room and have our nervous system like create these ripples that can like positively transform the energy of a room. And when I apply that to, you know, this ability to really see yourself and see your brilliance and see that eternal spark in you really fucking clearly. And the kind of ripples that creates. Like, that's it. That's the thing. That's the thing. We're going to be going in for 4 months. There is an application. It costs 1,777. There will be payment plans. I speak to people individually about that. And I've done some pieces. We're going to be really cranking it up in the next few weeks. I've got lots of stuff to write and bring through on it. And again, I'll be doing a specific teaching on it as well. But yeah, that's everything. I hope that landed. That was a pleasure again. And I'll be putting the recordings out in several places, actually. They'll be on Facebook because I'm running this live on Facebook. They'll be on Instagram. I'll put them on YouTube, and I'm going to send them through emails as well. So they're going to be fucking everywhere. Thank you all so much again for showing up. Lovely to see those of you who are here, and love you all. Bye.